You are not crazy. In the quiet of your own mind, you know this to be true. You are lucid. You remember your name, your history, and your life. Perhaps you argued too passionately with your husband about money. Perhaps you grieved too loudly and for too long over the death of a child, making your family uncomfortable. Or perhaps you simply inherited a fortune that a distant relative wishes to control. It does not matter what the truth is. The carriage has stopped rattling over the cobblestones. You look up and see the towering, foreboding gates of the Bethlem Royal Hospital. The world knows it by a different, more terrifying name, Bedlam. Two doctors, men you barely know, have signed a piece of paper. That paper is stronger than your word, stronger than your rights, and stronger than the truth. As the heavy iron gates slam shut behind you, sealing you in, you tell yourself that this is a hospital. You tell yourself you are here to be cared for, but you are about to discover that in Victorian England, the cure is infinitely worse than the disease. Welcome to the asylum. To understand the true horror of Bedlam, you must first understand that for centuries, it was not operated as a medical facility. It was a circus. If you entered Bedlam in the 18th or early 19th century, your first shock wouldn't be the doctors or the screams of the patients. It would be the tourists. Until the year 1815, the asylum was arguably London's most popular tourist attraction, rivaling Westminster Abbey and the Tower of London. For a single penny, the same price as a loaf of bread, any member of the public could walk in off the dirty streets to view the lunatics. On the first Tuesday of the month, admission was free and crowds flocked to the galleries. Imagine this scene. You are locked in a cell, suffering from depression or anxiety, trying to hold on to your fragile sanity, and just a few feet away, separated by iron bars, is a crowd of well-dressed aristocrats, families with children, and rough laborers. They are pointing at you, they are laughing. It was considered good fun to bring a long stick to poke the patients through the bars to see if they would scream or attack. If a patient was sitting quietly, visitors were known to throw nuts, fruit, or even stones at them to provoke a reaction. The more violent the patient became, the more the crowd cheered. Over 96,000 visitors a year walked through those halls. The governors of the hospital didn't see a problem, they saw a profit. The suffering of the inmates was merely a ticket to entertainment. But when the sun went down and the tourists went home, the real nightmare began. The medical philosophy of the time was based on a brutal misunderstanding of the human body. Victorian doctors, particularly the Monroe dynasty, who ran Bedlam for generations, believed that insanity was a physical blockage. They believed the madness was caused by an excess of blood in the brain or a corruption of the humours. To fix you, they didn't need to listen to you, they needed to break you. The treatments designed to shock the sanity back into a patient were indistinguishable from medieval torture. If you were diagnosed as hysterical, a common label for women who were simply loud or uncooperative, you might be prescribed rotational therapy. This was the brainchild of Erasmus Darwin, grandfather of Charles Darwin. The patient was strapped securely into a chair suspended from the ceiling or mounted on a pivot. A doctor or an orderly would then spin the chair at terrifying speeds, reaching up to 100 revolutions per minute. The centrifugal force would drive the blood violently to your extremities. The sensation was agonizing. Patients would vomit uncontrollably, lose control of their bowels, and often scream until they passed out from the sheer G-force. When you woke up, lying in your own filth, dizzy and broken, the doctor would ask if you felt calmer. If you refused to submit, or if you complained, they would simply strap you back in and spin you again. For those who were considered too hot with mania, there was hydrotherapy. This wasn't a relaxing spa day. It was a calculated assault on the nervous system. Patients were restrained in a bath, unable to move. Gallons of freezing cold water were then dumped directly onto their heads from a height, or they were unexpectedly plunged into ice water. The goal was to simulate the sensation of drowning to terrify the patient so profoundly that the heat of madness would be extinguished by the cold shock of survival instinct. But perhaps the most harrowing story to emerge from the stone walls of Bedlam is that of William Norris. Norris was an American Marine who had been admitted to Bedlam. He was considered dangerous, but the hospital's solution for him was something out of a horror novel. For more than 10 years, William Norris was kept in a specialized iron harness designed specifically for him. A thick iron collar was riveted around his neck. This collar was attached by a short chain to a vertical iron bar set into the wall behind his bed. An iron ring was welded around his waist, and his ankles were shackled. The chain was so short that for 10 years, Norris could not stand up straight. He could not lie down on his side. He could only sit or lie flat on his back. He lived like this for a decade. When reformers finally found him in 1814, his arms were wasted away, his skin was pale as death, but his mind miraculously was still lucid. He spent his days reading books that compassionate keepers gave him, trapped in an iron cage of his own body. His discovery caused a national scandal, but for William Norris, the best years of his life had already been stolen by the very men paid to care for him. The most terrifying part of the Victorian Asylum system, however, wasn't the torture devices or the iron chains. It was how easily you could end up there. The laws of the Victorian era regarding insanity were terrifyingly loose. There was no trial, there was no jury, there was no need for criminal evidence. The certificate of insanity required only the signatures of 2 doctors. In an era where doctors could be easily bribed, this became a weapon. A husband who wanted to get rid of a troublesome wife to marry his mistress could simply pay for 2 signatures. A family embarrassed by a relative with different religious views or a rebellious streak could have them locked away to protect the family reputation. Once you were in the system, your legal rights evaporated. You became a non-person. Your property could be seized. Your children could be taken away. And the cruelest trap of all was the diagnosis itself. If you protested your innocence, if you screamed that you were sane, the doctors would smile calmly and write in their ledger, "Patient suffers from delusions of sanity." Your denial was used as proof of your madness. Your anger at being imprisoned was listed as mania. There are records of women locked away for decades for reasons that seem absurd today. Women were admitted for a novel reading, for religious enthusiasm, for suppressed menstruation, or simply for imaginary trouble. One particularly tragic case involved a woman who was admitted because she refused to speak to her husband. She remained in the asylum for 20 years. Her silence was deemed madness. Her submission was the only price for freedom. Eventually, the secrets of Bedlam could not be kept behind the walls forever. In 1815, a parliamentary inquiry exposed the horrors of William Norris and the rotational chairs. The public was outraged not necessarily because they cared about the mad, but because the cruelty was so blatant. The tourists were eventually banned, the iron chains were removed. The hospital moved to a new location, trying to leave its dark reputation behind. But the shadow of the Victorian Asylum remains. It stands as a monument to a time when science was used as a weapon, where the cure was pain, and where the line between the doctors and the madman was terrifyingly thin. It forces us to ask a question that still haunts us today: who gets to decide what is normal? And what happens when the people with the keys are crazier than the people in the cells? So, the next time you feel overwhelmed, or anxious, or angry at the world, take a deep breath, stay calm, don't raise your voice, and whatever you do, don't let them see you cry. Because once the key turns in the lock, and the heavy wooden door shuts between you and the sunlight, no one is listening. If you enjoyed this look into the madness of history, hit the like button to keep your sanity. And tell us in the comments, which Victorian treatment scares you the most? The spinning chair, the cold bath, or the human zoo? Don't forget to subscribe to Grim Gaslight and ring the bell for your weekly dose of history's darkest secrets. Until next time, watch your back.